At 19, she discovered an incredible secret behind her millionaire cowboy husband's wedding gift. Clara stood in the soft glow of the sunset, newlywed bliss bubbling in her chest as she clutched the ornate saddle that had once belonged to her father. The weight of the leather felt heavy with unspoken words, yet the laughter from the wedding guests faded as unease settled over her. In that vibrant atmosphere of joy, she felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. The glittering gift was more than a beautiful heirloom. It was a reminder of what had been lost and what lay ahead. Suddenly, she was not just a bride, but a daughter mourning the recent death of her father, taking on the role of caregiver for her mother. The flickering light of happiness dimmed, burdened by the reality that their small Texas home, once filled with laughter, now echoed with her mother's quiet grief. Clara hesitated, wrestling with the weight of duty pressing down on her heart. As days slipped into weeks, Clara immersed herself in her life as Jake's wife, nestled among the sprawling ranches and golden fields of hope. But in the quiet corners of their new home, she discovered a box tucked away in a forgotten cabinet. Dust danced in the slanting light as she lifted the lid, unveiling a collection of letters and faded photographs. Each piece whispered secrets about intertwined family ties, weaving a narrative she had never anticipated. Clara's heart raced. She felt a desperate need to learn more, for knowledge could either be a curse or a blessing. With each letter she read, more weight settled on her shoulders. Jake's charming smile and effortless laughter depicted a life of luxury, but their family's past was cloaked in shadows that threatened to spiral into chaos. She felt a jolt of determination accompanied by an unsettling fear. Revealing her finds to Jake might unravel the fragile happiness she had just built. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The truth, as she discovered, was that Jake's family wealth came from a history of cattle ranching marred by unethical dealings, actions that had directly harmed her own father's legacy. Clara felt as if the ground beneath her crumbled at the thought, each revelation pulling her further from the path of serenity she longed to follow. The stars above flickered ominously, mirroring the chaos in her mind. Caught between love for Jake and loyalty to her father's memory, Clara faced a daunting choice.
Her heart twisted at the possibility of shattering something beautiful with the truths she had unearthed. As she stared at the saddle, a manifestation of her father's pride, Clara felt as if she stood on the edge of a precipice, a whisper of injustice calling her to action. Would revealing their family's entangled histories strengthen their bond or ignite a divide too wide to traverse? The tension swelled within her, and with Jake obliviously by her side, Clara braced for the moment when her discoveries would either solidify their love or tear it apart. The weight of unspoken truths loomed, and her breath quickened as she readied herself to confront the reality that might change everything. Would she honor her father's legacy, risking the love she held dear? The night was thick with unvoiced questions, but Clara could almost hear the echo of the saddle's history whispering to her, urging her toward a choice that could shatter their world. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting warm rays across Clara's face as she sipped coffee, the bitter taste grounding her amidst the turmoil. The saddle stood in a corner, more than just a relic. It felt like an anchor tethered to her father's memory, yet it also represented the conflict swirling within her. Each sip reminded her of the pivotal choice ahead, a decision that would demand bravery she was still discovering within herself. As Jake ambled in, his carefree laughter echoed against the walls, harmonizing with his effortless charm. He poured himself some coffee, and Clara's heart fluttered in the rhythm of domesticity, a stark combination of warmth and tension. How could she bear to taint those moments with harsh realities? Was truth always worth the potential destruction it could bring? "You okay?" Jake's voice cut through her thoughts, worry flashing briefly in his eyes. Clara forced a smile, her internal struggle tightening the knot in her chest. "Just thinking," she replied, her voice wavering. Each word felt like a betrayal, reinforcing barriers she didn't want to build. She had always admired Jake for his integrity and kindness. Revealing the letters would not only shatter their harmony, but also fracture his sense of self. Clara pulled away from the table, restless energy urging her to act. Instead of wrestling in silence, she returned to the box of hidden truths. The letters beckoned her, the faded ink eager to share their stories. As she sifted through them, the words began to form a tapestry of betrayal, detailing sordid dealings that marred her father's reputation and sullied the ranching legacy. Each letter felt like a confrontation, a voice demanding justice and acknowledgement. Her mind raced, weighing the prospect of confronting Jake. Would unveiling their intertwined histories clarify her feelings or lead to a fracture she couldn't mend? The thought of Jake, broken by knowledge of his family's wrongdoings, hurt more than she anticipated.
She needed to fathom her own feelings first. Did her loyalty lie with her father or her husband? The morning stretched into afternoon, the sun climbing high in the clear blue sky. Guided purely by instinct, she ventured outside to the barn, where horses whinnied and life thrived unrestrained. Perhaps the clear significance of her father's saddle would reveal some truth about her own path. If she was going to face this, she needed clarity, strength, and an understanding of her own art. With each step toward the barn, an image of her father flooded her memory. He had always taught her to stand up for what was right, for justice, even when it was difficult. She could hear his voice weaving through the air, reminding her that love sometimes meant making the hardest choices, not for oneself, but for the collective well-being of those who followed. Did she dare live in the shadows of fear, or could she face the truth and forge a brighter path? Clara's heart raced, melting into determination, but with it came underlying trepidation. Gazing at the saddle, she felt it pulse with the promise of a legacy she was now tasked to uphold. It wasn't just about her father's history anymore. It was about building a future with Jake, intertwining their fates while confronting the truths of their past. The sun began to set, shadows creeping across the earth, as Clara prepared for the conversation that could alter everything. The weight upon her chest shifted, evolving into a sense of purpose. What if revealing the truth led to a partnership forged in authenticity rather than pretense? She had to know. "Jake," she called, her voice steadying with resolution. "We need to talk." The moment loomed heavy with unspoken implications, each beat of her heart echoing the urgency of the truth that threatened to spill forth, forever altering the course of their relationship. Would love transcend the past shadow, or would it shatter the world they had just begun to build together? Clara stood at the threshold of the barn, her heart pounding as anticipation coiled tightly within her. The words she was about to utter could unravel everything she had built with Jake. As he stepped out into the afternoon light, a smile gracing his lips and a twinkle of curiosity in his eyes, she felt a pang of longing mixed with dread. This man, who embodied warmth and trust, deserved love untainted by shadows, but could she offer that without first confronting the truth? "Clara," Jake's voice was rich with concern. He approached her, his casual demeanor a veil over the weight of the moment. "What's on your mind?" The air hung thick with unsaid feelings, Clara's resolution almost faltering as she realized the personal stakes. Betrayal lingered like a dark cloud above them, waiting to unleash its storm. She thought of the letters, the tired ink detailing her father's misdeeds, scattering whispers of shame through her veins. "I need to show you something," she finally said, breaking eye contact to rummage through the box again. Her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed over the brittle paper, pulling out a few letters. Jake's brows furrowed as she handed them over, confusion etched on his face. He began reading, and she watched as the light in his eyes dimmed with each sentence. "Clara, what is this?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about my father," she stammered, each word weighing heavier than the last. "His business dealings. There's so much you don't know. I didn't want to hide this from you." Jake's gaze bore into her, searching for answers amidst his growing concern. The weight of the revelations had shifted beyond herself. It now resided in the space between them, a chasm she could feel widening with every hesitation. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, hurt filtering into his tone. "I thought I could protect our future," Clara replied, her voice shaky but firm. "I thought love could overshadow the past, but I see now I was wrong." The realization that courage did not always emerge from anger or despair hit her hard. It could blossom from vulnerability, too. She had underestimated how honesty, even when painful, could act as a catalyst for deeper connection. Jake inhaled sharply, clenching the letters in his hand. "Your father," he murmured, disbelief lingering in the air. "This changes everything." "Does it?" Clara shot back, surprising herself with the intensity of her question. "Or does it give us a chance to start anew, to build our dreams on something real?" For the first time, Clara's faith in her own judgment flickered to life as she confronted the fear that had restrained her for so long. What if this moment led them to redefine their relationship, not as a story marred by deceit, but rather as one resilient enough to face the truth together? Jake's expression softened, and sadness resonated in his eyes. "I loved the image of your father as a hero in my mind. This complicates things." "Everyone has their gray areas, Jake. I think you taught me that yourself."
Clara's words carried a newfound strength, a personal growth stepping forth in defiance against her initial doubts. He began to speak, but then paused, weighing his response through a shroud of conflicting emotions, pain mingling with an undeniable respect. Did this bring them closer to a shared understanding, or further apart? As darkness settled over the ranch, transforming the landscape into a chiaroscuro of shifting shadows, Clara knew they stood on the precipice of an internal reckoning that extended well beyond familial ties. It was about choosing to confront the past and redefine love. "Maybe," she said softly, her voice breaking through the stillness, "we can't just erase the past, but perhaps we can learn from it and reshape our future."
Clara felt a shift, an invitation to mutual vulnerability, a crack in the wall of tension that had built between them. But uncertainty still loomed in Jake's eyes, ready to either lend itself to deeper connection or solidify their fracture. In that charged moment, Clara understood. They were no longer simply fighting for love, but for their very identities. As Jake took a deep breath, preparing to respond, Clara realized the next step in their journey was as momentous as the last and entirely unpredictable. "Clara," he began, his voice steadying with each syllable, "I think we need to talk about what comes next." Each heartbeat echoed the urgency to confront the unknown that lay ahead. Would they emerge as stronger allies or shattered hearts? The path was waiting just beyond their grasp, and Clara sensed a decisive change was on the horizon. Each moment felt heavier than the last, the air thick with an unspoken tension that wrapped around Clara like a tightening noose. As Jake's gaze settled on her, his expression a mixture of hurt and contemplation, Clara steeled herself for what came next. This wasn't just about the revelations of her father's past. It was about how those revelations would shape their shared future. "We need clarity," Jake finally said, his tone laced with a newfound assertiveness. "Your father's actions, it colors everything we've shared. I can't pretend this doesn't change how I see you." Clara's heart sank, yet the truth of his words resonated deeply within her. She had clung to the hope that love could push through the darkness unscathed, but now the shadows loomed large, requiring her to confront the truth behind her own identity. "I understand," she responded softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Each syllable felt like an invitation to explore painful terrain only partially understood. "But you don't need to lose sight of who I am." "Can you honestly say your father's choices don't reflect on you?" Jake's question pierced through her defenses. She wanted to shield herself from that thought, yet it had already navigated into the corners of her mind. Clara took a step back, absorbing the weight of the moment. "They don't define me," she declared, "but they are a part of me. I'm not running from it. This is why I wanted to talk to you, so we can navigate this together." The insistence in her own voice surprised her. She was no longer just a victim of her father's decisions. She had turned a new page in her personal narrative. They could wrestle with the implications together, not as separate entities fighting against the past, but as a team revising their beliefs. But a knot of uncertainty tugged at her heart. "What if you can't see me now?" she questioned, feeling frail and exposed. Silence draped over them, the weight of potential paths reverberating between them. Jake's gaze traveled past Clara, searching for something, an answer, a signal that would allow him to shift from hurt to understanding.
Clara held her breath, even as the shadows began to creep in around her, filling the space with anxiety. What if the feelings that had once knitted them closely together frayed at the edges? "Listen," he said finally, his voice low and firm. "Maybe we both need to ask ourselves some tough questions." The readiness in his tone ignited something inside her, a flicker of defiance. She was ready to delve deeper into herself, to question what it meant to rise above inherited darkness. This was her chance to cultivate her own values, separate from the burdensome legacy of her father. "What do you mean?" Clara prompted, a mix of hope and apprehension swirling within her. "This could either tear us apart or pull us together. We must resiliently define our relationship beyond every shadow from the past," Jake articulated, each word laden with importance. Feeling emboldened, Clara locked eyes with him, determined to dig deeper. "How do we do that?" "We reflect on who we are when our masks come off," he replied, an earnest spark igniting in his gaze. "Let's explore what we genuinely want, beyond everything we faced." Clara nodded, exhilaration coursing through her veins. This was more than a moment of vulnerability. It was an opportunity for growth. They could redefine their identities, not as victims of circumstances, but as architects of their dreams. "Then let's start with that," she said, the steadiness of her voice surprising her. They shared a fragile smile, an agreement forged in the withering heat of honesty. The journey ahead demanded bravery. As Clara and Jake embarked in the direction of reflection, she realized vulnerability began to shape her into someone formidable, not merely reactive, but proactive in her understanding of love, integrity, and identity. What began as cracks in their foundations now offered a doorway to transformation. Yet in the quiet solitude of the evening, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that confronting the past was only the beginning. Without question, deeper shadows still lurked, whispering of trials yet to come. Then, from the distant corners of her mind, a new thought ignited. Perhaps her father's choices held secrets, ones she hadn't yet uncovered. What if understanding those secrets held the key not to only her identity, but to the evolution of their relationship? With resolve strengthening her core, Clara turned to Jake, waiting to forge ahead, knowing full well the journey had only just begun. Clara sat on the edge of her bed, her heart racing as the shadows of doubt wrestled with a glimmer of newfound courage. The evening glow filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of light that highlighted the chaos of her thoughts. As she stared out the window, the world outside seemed vibrant and full of potential, yet she felt anchored by the weight of her father's past. The conversation with Jake lingered in her mind, replaying snippets like a haunting melody.
She needed to confront not just her father's legacy, but the implications it had for her own choices. A surge of determination washed over her. She was done being a passive observer in her life. It was time to take control. With purposeful resolve, Clara grabbed her journal, her safe haven for thoughts and aspirations. She flipped to a blank page, pen poised above the paper. The act felt sacred, like she was about to shape the contours of her own identity. Reflecting on the notion Jake had introduced, she wrote in bold letters, "What do I want?" As the pen scratched across the page, a series of realizations poured forth. Clara began cataloging her dreams, a career in creative writing, a thriving relationship built on honesty, a life unencumbered by the shadows of her father's choices. This simple act of writing transformed her fears into tangible goals, each one a stepping stone toward self-discovery. With each line, empowerment surged through her veins. She realized that she didn't have to emulate her father's life or let it define her decisions. The vision of a future unmarred by inherited darkness took shape in her mind, a chance to create her own legacy, one that would inspire rather than instill shame. But as her list grew, so did the gnawing curiosity about her father's hidden secrets. What had driven him to make choices that would later ripple through generations? Clara hesitated, a shadow of fear passing through her resolve. What if digging deeper into her lineage revealed truths more painful than she anticipated? The thought trapped her momentarily, but it was quickly replaced by the realization that uncovering those truths could be pivotal for her growth. She could harness the knowledge, transform it, and write her own narrative. If she was going to step away from the shadows, she had to brave the dark corners of her family's history. With the ink barely dried on the page, Clara vowed to speak to her mother. Secrets have a way of festering in silence, and addressing them would be the first step towards dismantling the past. It was daunting. Confronting familial truths always was, but Clara knew she had to face whatever lay ahead forthrightly. The prospect of the conversation loomed large as she contemplated her mother's potential defenses. Would she be willing to share the history that Clara felt was hers to own? The thought sparked an adrenaline rush. Clara tucked her journal away and glanced at the clock, time slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. She grabbed her phone, fingers hovering over her mother's name and her contacts. The urge to retreat gnawed at her, but the resolve to move forward pulsed stronger, igniting her courage. In that instant, she remembered Jake's words, the promise of shared vulnerability, and the chance to confront their shadows together. It wasn't merely about her. It was about crafting a new path for both of them.
With a deep breath, she pressed the call button, anticipation and anxiety swirling within her as the line connected. "Hey, Mom, can we talk?" As her mother's voice came through, Clara felt the stakes escalate. What would her mother reveal? What truths awaited them in the tangled fabric of their shared history? The journey into the depths of her family legacy was about to begin, and Clara was ready to uncover what secrets lay hidden, knowing that with each revelation she would fortify her stance in the world. But just as the conversation drifted into reluctance and acceptance, a shocking thought pierced through Clara's mind. What if the truth about her father's actions was intertwined with something greater? Something that could alter not only her understanding of her family, but also her relationship with Jake in unforeseen ways. As her mother began to speak, Clara braced herself for the storm of revelations ahead, knowing that each answer could lead them further down a twisting path of discovery. Clara gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles white, as her mother hesitated on the other end. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words and memories that had likely been locked away for years. She exhaled slowly and reminded herself this was not just any conversation. It was a confrontation with her family's hidden history. "Are you still there?" her mother finally asked, surprise woven in with a hint of apprehension. "Yeah, I'm here," Clara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I wanted to ask about Dad, about his past." The tension in the air thickened, and Clara could almost feel her mother tense up. What brought this on? It was a question wrapped in caution, and Clara realized just how fragile the ground was beneath them. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've been thinking a lot about who I want to be and what I want my life to look like. I can't ignore the fact that his choices impacted us. I need to understand." A long pause followed, filled with the weight of decisions, regrets, and possibly terrifying truths. "Clara, some things at best left in the past. No," Clara interrupted, driven by the newfound clarity in her heart. "I can't keep pretending that I don't want to know. I feel like I'm standing at the edge of a cliff, and if I don't jump into this, I might never have the chance again." Her mother's sigh was heavy, resonating with a sorrow that made Clara fear what was coming. "It's complicated. Your father, he wasn't who you think he was." "Then tell me the truth," Clara urged, her heart racing. She felt more alive than she ever had, driven by the desire for understanding, connection, and the hope that clarity would grant her new freedom. "What are you afraid of?" Expecting resistance, Clara was startled by a soft sob on the other end. "I just don't want to hurt you." "Mom, please, I need to hear this." The implicit risk was dizzying. Could the truth reshape everything she thought she knew?
Finally, her mother took a deep breath and began recounting snippets of her father's life, a narrative fraught with decisions motivated by desperation, fear, and ultimately profound love. Clara listened intently, each detail painting a picture that was both familiar and unsettling. He was caught in a cycle of bad choices, but he did them to protect us. He didn't want you to see the world as it really was. He loved you too much for that, her mother explained, words tumbling out with a mix of regret and affection. A knot twisted in Clara's stomach, torn between sympathy for the man and resentment for his actions. How could she reconcile these conflicting truths? In that moment, it struck her that this was not merely a revelation about her father, but an awakening regarding her own identity. If she could understand the man behind the choices, perhaps she could redefine her path as well. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Clara asked, her voice shaking as she absorbed the emotional charge. The thought of her mother withholding these secrets loomed heavy between them. "Because as much as you want to know the truth, it scares me to think of what it will do to us," her mother replied, vulnerability threading through her voice. This conversation was unveiling raw, tangled emotions. Clara sensed an opportunity for growth amid the chaos. Perhaps understanding her father's flaws could grant her license to embrace her own imperfections. She felt a flicker of the independence she sought, a recognition that she was not just her father's daughter, but also a unique spirit capable of forging her own destiny. "I understand now," Clara said, acknowledging the complex interplay of love and betrayal in her family history. "But this is my life too. I want to be free from what he did." Her mother's silence was heavy, laden with the admission that Clara was indeed right. As the conversation came to an end, Clara felt less like a victim and more like an architect of her future. She was scared, but a kind of electric energy surged through her veins. The doubts about her past transformed, illuminating what lay ahead. Yet a shadow of uncertainty lingered. How would Jake react to these revelations? Would it draw them closer as they'd navigate mutual shadows, or would it expose fractures in their developing bond? Clara was left with that burning question as she hung up the phone, the weight of her father's legacy morphing into something more than just an anchor. It began to feel like an invitation to transform. With a new purpose, she opened her journal and began to write, the words flowing like a river breaking free from its dam. She was swimming toward the clarity she craved, but what awaited her on the other side remained uncertain. Just then, her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Jake lighting up the screen. "Can we talk? I need to tell you something important." Clara's heart raced anew. This was just the start. The unraveling threads laced around her past were only beginning to define her present, and she was ready to step into the storm. Clara stared at the phone in her hand, her heart pounding. Jake's text felt like a key, not just to a conversation, but to the unknown. What could possibly be so important? The weight of their previous discussions, tangled with her new revelations, swam in her mind, layering over each other like a treacherous fog. She glanced around her dim apartment, now feeling like a cage instead of a sanctuary. The walls, once comforting, started to close in, reminding her of the pieces of herself she was wrestling with. It was time to confront not only her father's legacy, but also the implications of her choices and relationships in the present. Clara took a deep breath and typed back, "I'm free now. Where do you want to meet?" She hit send, mind racing. As she awaited his response, Clara's thoughts spiraled back to the conversation with her mother. Every detail of her father's complicated past seemed to highlight just how much she needed to discover about herself. Setting aside her phone, she returned to her journal. Writing had become a tangible outlet for her confusion. "What do I want?" Encapsulating the essence of her struggle, she scrawled frantically, trying to dissect her emotions. The truth hung there, glaring. She sought to be free of the burdens her father's life had dictated. But what did that freedom entail? Grabbing a pen, she scribbled a list. Independence, honesty, rebuilding relationships, navigating her feelings for Jake. The names jumped off the page, mixing and intertwining into a web of urgency. Each item felt like a step, a plan forming to dismantle old expectations and ghostly remnants of a past life. Her phone buzzed again, drawing her mind away from the ink stagnating on the page. Jake's reply lit up the screen. "How about the cafe on 5th? I'll be there in 20. The urgency of the meeting stirred something deep within Clara, a mix of anticipation and dread. She felt like a tightrope walker, maintaining balance while juggling conflicting narratives of who she was and who she wanted to become. What would happen when she told Jake everything? Would he embrace the complexities, or would he recoil in fear and confusion, mirroring her mother's response? Buried under those thoughts was a darker fear. What if Jake had secrets of his own that could fracture the fragile foundation they were building? Stepping into the shower, Clara washed away lingering doubts and fears, mentally preparing herself. Each drop of water felt like a cleansing wave against the whirlpool of her emotions, washing away the hesitation, beginning to nurture the person she was becoming, someone who demanded honesty from herself and others. After dressing, she stood in front of the mirror, taking a moment to affirm her resolve. You can do this. She needed to.
For all her father's faults, he had taught her the power of love, the good and the bad. What kind of life would free her from his shadow? The answer felt like it fluttered just out of reach, though gaining clarity about herself made it more tangible. Arriving at the cafe, Clara scanned the bustling crowd, apprehension and excitement wrestling within her. She spotted Jake at a corner table, a storm of emotions playing across his face. As she walked over, she could sense an invisible barrier between them. Their journey had led them here, but how much further would it take them? "Hey," Jake greeted lightly, but his eyes held a deeper current of worry. "I was about to text you. I have something that ties in to what we both need to talk about." Clara's breath caught in her throat, another unraveling thread. What could this mean? As they settled into their conversation, a pulse of electric tension hovered between them, the dialogue offering myriad pathways, some bright with promise, others shadowed by uncertainty. She needed to know what was coming. She had to know if a shared truth could be the bridge they both needed to cross. Jake leaned in closer, his expression earnest. "Clara, there's something about my family that I haven't told you." And with those words, Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What had Jake been keeping from her? Clara's pulse quickened, every fiber of her being demanding clarity. Even as doubt curled around her thoughts. She had already opened herself up so much with Jake, but this revelation felt akin to stepping off a cliff without any discernible bottom. "What do you mean?" she managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. Jake's gaze shifted momentarily, as if he were searching for the right words among the scattered coffee cups and half-eaten pastries. Clara leaned forward, the table between them emphasizing the growing distance that she felt creeping in. Their connection, once vibrant, felt tested by hidden truths. "It's my family," he finally began, voice low and heavy with hesitation. "They're not what they seem. My parents have a complicated past, and I've never really known how to talk about it." His brows knitted together, and he took a breath that hinted at deeper frustrations. "It's like I've always lived in a shadow, too." Shadows. The word echoed in Clara's mind, resonating with her own struggle against the burdens of her father's legacy. Here they were, two individuals caught in their respective fogs, grappling with the weight of unseen histories. "Complicated how?" she pressed, her heart racing as if straining toward revelation. "I've never told anyone this," Jake said, tightening his grip on the table's edge. "I was adopted. My parents, they adopted me after a very traumatic experience. It was easier for them to pretend that everything was fine rather than face their past and mine." Clara's breath hitched, her mind racing.
The pieces began to collide, forming a jigsaw of emotion and raw honesty. "Did they ever tell you what happened?" "They wouldn't let me ask," Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was always, leave the past behind, or focus on the future. But what if the past still holds us?" He looked her in the eyes, a desperate plea for understanding that pierced through the tension. It struck Clara that he was battling shadows of his own, much like the ones haunting her. Were their lives bound together by unspoken truths? Both searching for authenticity in the wreckage of familial expectations. "Have you tried to find out?" she asked, her curiosity piquing. Jake shook his head. "I was scared. What if I learned that I'm just a chapter in someone else's story? What if those revelations only added more layers to this unfeeling mask?" Clara felt a rush of empathy swelling within her, recognizing that Jake's hesitation mirrored her struggles. Here they were, two souls caught between silence and the urgent need for truth. But that's the only way we can move forward, isn't it? Embrace who we are, roots and all? A flicker of realization crossed Jake's face as he contemplated her words. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but how do I start?" A wave of wisdom washed over Clara, fusing their separate yet similar journeys. She had to answer his question as though she were standing before herself. "By opening up. Start by telling me everything. What you know, what you feel. We can navigate this together." Jake's eyes softened, though uncertainty still lingered. Her heart swelled as a spark of determination ignited within her. This was the essence of their relationship, challenging one another to confront unfinished stories, to dig deeper and discover the strengths hidden beneath layers of pain. But as she spoke those words, a fresh wave of anxiety coursed through Clara. Was she ready to confront her own story while helping Jake with his? Shadows clung tightly, threatening to entangle them both. "Okay," Jake nodded, as if prepping himself for the plunge into vulnerability. "And I want to know your story too, especially about your father." With a small exhale, Clara felt the balance tips dangerously. She was prepared to unearth buried truths, but had no idea how her revelations would intertwine with his. What if exposure exposed weaknesses they could neither navigate nor escape? As they exchanged glances, the unspoken tension hung above them like a storm cloud ready to burst, suffocating yet invigorating. Could she unveil her weaknesses without fear or judgment? The weight of the moment wrapped around her like a veil. Moments passed where Clara's thoughts tangled, torn between wanting to reveal everything and withholding what could potentially unravel their tenuous bond, a balancing act that felt beyond her ability. "Jake, She hesitated, suddenly wrestling with horror at what the truth could unleash.
"Clara," he interjected softly, fear dawning on his features. "Just promise me you'll let me in. Whatever it is, let's face it together." And there it was, an invitation entwined with her deepest fears. The time to confront the unspoken shadows was now. Did she have the strength to step forward? Jake's expression wavered between hope and trepidation, both yearning for connection while longing to protect themselves from pain. "Okay," Clara whispered, forcing a breath through her tightened throat. "I'll try." But as she prepared to reveal her family's history, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that unveiling secrets might not only shape their future, but could also tear apart the fragile thread of trust they were building. What if the truths she uncovered shattered the foundations of not just her life, but of Jake's, and instruments of revelation were quickly turning into weapons? "Clara?" Jake drew her back from her spiraling thoughts, his voice anchored and certain, as if grasping for something to hold on to. "What if the truths we unearth ultimately bind us rather than push us apart?" And in that moment, Clara understood that the journey ahead held the promise of discovery, one filled with uncharted territories of emotion and ambition, demanding answers she could hardly fathom. With her heart pounding in her chest, she stood on the precipice of her decision. Dare she leap into the unknown? The stirring question loomed larger than life. What truths lay beneath the surface, and could they possibly be the key to unlocking each other's future? Clara's heart was a percussion of uncertainty as she gathered her thoughts, battling the walls she had built around herself for so long. Jake's steady gaze held her, fierce and expectant, beckoning her to leap into the abyss they both loomed over. He was right about one thing. The unspoken truths were like spectral chains, binding them both under the weight of secrets that craved airing. "Okay," she exhaled, steeling her resolve. "I will tell you about my father, but I want you to know, it's not just his story. It's about me. It shaped who I am." The confession hung in the air, charged and electric,
each word pulling at her internal knots. Jake nodded slowly, his expression shifting from anticipation to an earnestness that relieved some of her tension. "I'm ready. Whenever you are." This support felt like a lifeline, yet Clara was suddenly acutely aware of the murky waters ahead. "My father was a successful businessman, well-respected, powerful, but his success came with a cost." She paused, the memories flooding back, the sheen of polished boardrooms dulled by the secrets that seeped through the cracks. He buried himself in work, but underneath that facade was a man who made deals shadowed in darkness, deals that affected many lives. It tore at him, and eventually it tore us apart. Jake leaned in closer, his eyes searching her for clarity in the chaos of emotions. "How did it affect you?"
"By making me feel as if I had to carry that weight myself," Clara replied, her voice quivering. "I often felt like I was living in his shadow, expected to achieve the perfection he could never attain. The more I learned about his dealings, the more I was faced with my own worth. I wanted to be free of his legacy, but didn't know how. Torn between wanting to honor him and the disgust at what he represented." Every sentence carved deeper into Clara's resolve, yet relief washed over her as she released these long-held burdens. She could see the resolution in Jake's face, a recognition that mirrored her internal struggle. "How did you manage to break free?" he asked gently. "By realizing I didn't have to be defined by him," she answered, sensing the new strength unfurling within her. "I started pursuing my passion for art, defying the narrative attached to my family name. I thought I could transform the pain into something beautiful, but I carried the fear that my past would always catch up with me, tainting my future. My art became my shield, but also my cage." Clara's gaze fell, the weight of insecurity constricting her chest. The night felt cooler, her throat dry with vulnerability. Jake reached across the table, his hand a warm anchor against her trepidation. "You've held all of this in for too long," he murmured. "And while I may not understand fully, I want you to know it doesn't diminish your strength. It highlights it. That you could emerge from all this chaos speaks volumes of your character." His validation was a balm to her festering wounds, yet a deeper concern nagged at her. Would this transformative moment fade once the veil was lifted, leaving her exposed to the very fears she had evaded? "What if my imperfections shatter whatever we're building?" she questioned softly. "They won't," Jake replied firmly, his grip tightening. "If anything, they'll help form a stronger foundation. Show me your cracks, Clara. That's what makes us human. After all, who can truly connect without revealing their flaws?" The tenderness of his response momentarily silenced Clara's inner critic. For the first time in years, she felt like she was walking toward a version of herself that could withstand exposure to the light. But just then, a slow flood of dread washed over her as another truth loomed. What would happen once her past clashed with Jake's history? Their intertwining paths wove a pattern that was unpredictable, promising discovery fraught with peril. "Jake," she whispered, anxiety creeping back as the truths from his past lingered menacingly unspoken between them. "What if your past is darker than mine? How will we cope?" He released a breath, his expression shifting into one of resolve. "Then we'll confront it together. I won't shy away from my demons, I assure you." A trembling ember ignited within her as Clara took in his words. There was power in partnership, even amid uncertainty.
Yet, as they sat in silence, she felt the shadows growing restless, eager to divulge other truths that threatened to spiral their connection into chaos. Could they truly face what was ahead? With the prospect of unveiling more layers of their lives awaiting them, Clara heard a familiar refrain echoing within her, an invitation to courage that pulled her in. The moment was arriving. All she had to do was embrace it. "Jake," she said finally, her voice steady with purpose, "I think this is the beginning of something worth fighting for, if we can face our truths, but we have to take it one step at a time." And just as she wished to explore this newfound partnership, an urgent thought sharpened her focus, reminding her that self-discovery was more than an internal journey. It was a test of strength and vulnerability. In that moment, she realized the real challenge lay not only in sharing her past, but also in confronting what lay ahead. What secrets awaited to be uncovered as they dove deeper into their respective histories? The future loomed uncertain, but one truth remained. There was no turning back now. Clara felt the air shift around her as Jake's gentle grip remained steady on her hand. Somehow their connection felt stronger than the fears that had clouded her mind moments before. The space between them pulsed with uncharted potential, a testament to every truth yet to be spoken. They were two souls standing at the very edge of vulnerability, and in that moment she understood. Transparency could illuminate dark corners they had both tried to keep hidden. "Jake, I want to help you uncover your past," she started, her voice unwavering. "But first, let's promise each other we'll remain honest, even when it's painful." The weight of those words settled around them, carrying the promise of a journey towards understanding. "Absolutely," Jake replied, a newfound clarity dawning in his eyes. "I want us to create our narrative together, free from shadows." Clara felt her heart soar. This commitment felt like a burning torch illumining a path through the tumultuous landscape of their histories. The cafe, once bustling with laughter and chatter, faded into the background as Clara and Jake leaned into one another's stories. With each shared narrative, Clara felt layers of herself unraveling. Each disclosure unveiled not only her vulnerabilities, but also the strength she had gained from facing them head-on. As they continued to speak, a sense of urgency wrapped itself around Clara's heart. "I want to know everything about your adoption, Jake. The pain, the love, how it shaped you. We can both turn the burdens into strength." She breathed deeply, knowing that each sentence carved out a space for both of their pasts to coexist. Jake nodded, the tension in his brow easing as vulnerability began to wash over him. "My parents were protective, shielding me from the truth.
They thought that by keeping me from my past, they could give me a future free from the weight of it." A hint of frustration clouded his tone, revealing the silent struggle he had carried. "But you need that past to build your future, too," Clara interjected, her voice steady. "It's a part of who you are, and embracing it could be liberating." "I know," he admitted, running a hand through his hair, the apprehension ever present in his demeanor. "I've always felt like I had to earn their love, to prove that I deserved to be part of their story. The fear of learning the truth paralyzed me. What if I wasn't enough?" Clara's heart ached for him. She saw the reflection of her struggles in his eyes. "You are enough, and you deserve to discover your truth without hesitation. We can face our histories together and find clarity." Her conviction rang true, staving off doubts that had clouded her perspective. As they delved deeper into the intricacies of their pasts, Clara realized every fear she had once associated with her father's legacy was transforming. His actions, while shrouded in darkness, had ignited a fierce resolve within her, one that encouraged her to confront vulnerability and stand boldly in her decisions. "I want to create a life that's anchored in authenticity," she declared, her tone unwavering. "I refuse to be bound by my father's mistakes. I wish to mold my own legacy, one created from love and openness." Clara felt her words ignite a spark between them, setting the atmosphere aflame with possibility. As Jake listened, the tension in his shoulders eased, and Clara could see a new resolve forming. "Then let's do it," he said, suddenly brimming with conviction. "Let's confront the past, not just mine, but our family's legacies, together." The shared determination hung between them. She could feel the ground solidifying under their feet. In that moment, she understood transformation was not merely personal, it was mutual. The past that had once threatened to diminish their worth now wove into a shared narrative, blossoming with potential for growth and connection. As they wrapped up their conversation, the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, bathing the cafe in a warm golden hue. Clara felt lighter, empowered in her choices. She could see each step forward as an opportunity to reshape their destinies, together, intertwined yet wholly unique in their journeys. Outside, the stars began to twinkle, casting ephemeral reflections of hope into the world. Clara and Jake stood hand in hand, channeling the beauty of the evening. "What comes next?" Clara wondered, excitement dancing with uncertainty. "We begin," Jake answered, eyes sparkling, a portal of new beginnings. The promise of a future born from understanding filled her with exhilaration. They were ready to face the intertwining legacies, equipped to walk forward hand in hand.
Clara recognized that self-discovery could lead to shared healing, that uncovering hidden truths would ultimately strengthen their bond rather than tear it apart. And as they walked together, the weight of their pasts seemed to shift, no longer shackles burdening them, but stepping stones leading to a vibrant path of authenticity and love. Clara felt the horizon stretch endlessly before her, shimmering with the potential of what they could build together. Her heart swelled with pride, recognizing she was not merely a product of her past, but actively reshaping her identity and future.
It was a triumph she vowed to celebrate, every moment echoing the achievements cultivated through courage, resilience, and honesty. With a steady gaze aimed toward the dusk-lit horizon, Clara made a promise, not just to Jake, but to herself, to face every shadow with vulnerability and grace, to embrace each discovered truth as a catalyst for her continued growth. She was ready, stronger than ever before. Now is your moment to transform with us. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.